This webinar topic today is going to be licensing KEPServerEX version 5, so specifically version 5 for KEPServerEX. You can follow Kepware's LinkedIn training spotlight page. So if you go to LinkedIn, I posted the link right there, and you can follow our page for training, and that will give you updates on upcoming webinars and what the topics are and when they're scheduled. And in June and July, in June we're doing our 518 release webinar, and in July we will be doing an local historian OPC HDA webinar. We have that tentatively planned. So those are some upcoming topics, and feel free to follow us on that LinkedIn Spotlight page to get that future information. So some introductions. Speaking is Joanne Bacharach. I will be your presenter today. I am the Senior Applications Engineer, and I manage the training department here at Kepware. With me in the background, and you might hear them typing coming through the audio at different times during the webinar, are several people from technical support as well as application engineering. So we have Andrew Black, a technical support engineer, Matthew Roy, our director of technical support, and then three applications engineers, Tom Gaudette, Kylie Corrigan, and Ray Labby. We have a strong force today here supporting me because we are aware that you probably have a lot of questions. Again, I will pause at the end of the webinar to answer questions, but if you have questions while I'm presenting, type them into your question pane, and this large team of people I have supporting me will follow up with an answer as quickly as possible. If you're interested in more information that's presented here, so maybe you're a beginner to Kepware, YouTube is a great resource for you. You can go to our YouTube page and find our best practices webinar for KEPServerEX, find tutorials on creating projects with KEPServerEX, and lots of other information. Also, we do have training classes that are in our Portland, Maine headquarters. We have training classes once a month coming up in June, July, and August. So if you want to come and actually have us instruct you in person, please sign up for those training courses on our Kepware webpage or email training@kepware.com. All right, so we're done with all the introductory info. Let's talk about what we're going to go over today. So for those of you who are beginners on this webinar, maybe you aren't totally familiar with Kepware and our software products, I'll give a very brief introduction to Kepware, and then we'll dig right into the topic of the day, which is licensing KEPServerEX version 5. I'll give you a demo, a step-by-step, get into the tools for licensing, like our license utility in My Kepware, some other licensing scenarios, reasons why your license may not be working, and then further resources. So a ton of information to cover on the webinar today. Before we kick off the actual presentation, I want to follow up with another poll question. I love these poll questions because it gets us to engage with you, the audience. And I want to know how much experience you have configuring KEPServerEX. Rate your experience, 1 being no experience and 5 being an expert. This just lets me have a feel for who you are as an audience and what level of information I should tailor to you. So go ahead and answer that question. It's up in the poll pane right now. So if you would please take a moment, select 1 through 5, what's your experience level? And I'll leave that open for a few more seconds. All right. Share those results with you. Looks like we got a pretty good spread. So let's start with a brief introduction to Kepware. So Kepware, we're a private software development company. We're focused solely on software solutions for the manufacturing industry. We were established in the mid-90s, and we are headquartered in Portland, Maine, which is in the northeastern corner of the U.S. in Canada, or near Canada, for those of you who may be international. We've spent 20 years developing communication software, and again, solely focused on that manufacturing realm, as well as other manufacturing industries like oil and gas and building automation and so on. We have a product portfolio. These are 4 of our main products. Again, today we're focusing on licensing for KEPServerEX. The licensing process for Link Master and Redundancy Master is similar to what you'll see today. And then ClientAce, the licensing process is much different. There's lots of information about those products if you're interested, but our flagship product and the one we'll focus on today is KEPServerEX, which is our communications platform that has tons of device connectivity options for you guys. So for those of you, this might be an intro to Kepware and KEPServerEX. It's one single software install, one platform that has all of these options to connect to a huge array of what we call devices or data sources. So that might be your PLCs, your RTUs, your DCS, as well as maybe you're connecting to a database or even another OPC server. So once you connect to those data sources and suck all the information into KEPServerEX, it's all in the one platform, and it consolidates that information from various sources into that one place, which makes it consistent information, reliable, and can go a long way towards reducing network traffic and decreasing system resource usage. So one place for all this data, and then we serve it up to these different clients. And we have different client interfaces for OPC, for database connections, ODBC. So maybe you have an OPC client in HMI, maybe you're using a vendor's client like Wonderware, Iconics, or Inductive Automation. Maybe you're an IT person, you're using something like Splunk or a network monitoring system. And you can use any of those systems to get data from KEPServerEX for any of these devices. And there's lots of tools available for you to connect those different devices. So to deploy and license KEPServerEX, first you're going to download the software package. Then you just select from our library what device drivers you want to use. We have a huge laundry list of device drivers and plugin options that you can select to get connectivity. Those drivers could be licensed individually, so you can purchase them one by one, or we have what we call suites that we package up, bundle up different drivers and some of the plugins into to make it easier from a purchasing and management perspective for you if you're buying multiple drivers. Once you purchase the product, then what you're going to do is license it and manage either your software license or hardware key certificates through what we call the license utility. So this step 3, after you purchase, this is going to be what we're focusing on today. You can always go back once you do step 3 and go license additional drivers and plugins as you need in KEPServerEX. So why license, and what's the difference between some software install that doesn't have a license versus one that does have a license? Well, what we call unlicensed products, it goes into what we call demo mode. So the demo mode is this little timer that will display in your configuration window. It's a 2-hour countdown timer. So it'll start at 2 hours and count down until it expires, and then it will shut down the runtime service. You can restart that demo timer by restarting the runtime service, and then it'll start again at 2 hours and count down. Obviously, if you're running in a production environment, you have very critical information. You don't want your production stopping every 2 hours. So that is the reason why you'd want to license the product and actually run without that demo timer restriction. The demo timer will trigger if you have unlicensed driver and a client comes and subscribes to information from the unlicensed driver, and it will trigger for the whole runtime. So if say you're running the Modbus driver and you decide, oh, I want to try out the advanced tags plugin because I want to do some calculations in my server, and the advanced tags plugin isn't licensed, if you reference something in that advanced tags plugin, the entire runtime will go into demo mode, and that includes that Modbus driver that you actually do have licensed. So the whole runtime is triggered if you're using even one thing that is unlicensed. That's why it's important to intelligently manage your licenses and purchase and activate the correct licenses for your production system. Also, if you upgrade to a newer version of KEPServerEX that's not covered by your support contract, and I'll get into this in much more detail later in the webinar, that will trigger a demo mode. So staying out of this demo mode is what you want if you're running in a production environment, and that's these licensing steps will keep you out of this demo mode situation. Okay, so we're ready to go on to licensing KEPServerEX version 5. I'm going to give a very brief overview and then a demo of kind of the simplest case. All right, so the licensing process involves creating and moving 2 text files from the target machine through our website, through what we call our Kepware portal for processing. Your host machine, if it doesn't have internet access to access this website, the Kepware portal, these text files can be copied and then maybe processed on another computer and then moved back to the host machine. So it's a round-trip process, and we're going to get into license utility on the host machine, generate what we call an activation request file, upload that file to the Kepware website, generate from the website an activation response file, and then import that to the license utility. So that's the full round trip that you see there. The intention of this licensing process is to lock a single license to a single install of KEPServerEX. So 1 license, 1 install on a single hardware host machine. A product is licensed to a specific hardware host machine. So it's going to bind to unique information from that host machine. And the license also sets the limits for version eligibility. So if you have an expired license, you're not going to be eligible for more recent software versions. So for example, we're on version 5.17 of our software right now. If your license expires after 5.17, you will not be able to upgrade to version 5.18, which releases next month in June. And definitely we'll get more into expiration dates and how to manage that later in the webinar. So activation IDs are what we use to license a product. That's what we input into the license utility to generate those files and to also input into the Kepware portal to generate the response file. The first thing you need when you're doing a new license for maybe a new system, you're going to get a software activation ID, and that activates the initial software product. After you do that initial software activation, you can use a support activation ID to extend version eligibility. So say your eligibility period expires, you can use a support activation ID. It's a fraction of the cost of a software activation, and that'll extend your eligibility for your version. And then we also provide an emergency activation ID that duplicates the original software activation ID and runs for 7 days in case, for whatever reason, maybe your machine goes down or something happens to the original host machine that had this software activation ID. I will definitely get into the support and emergencies activation IDs later in this webinar, but the first thing I'm going to cover is just the basic case of the software activation ID. Before I get to the demo, which I'll actually do right after this poll question, I want to ask, are you planning on licensing a software product for a new system? That's the scenario I'm just about to go through with your licensing software for a new system. Maybe it's your first time doing a license. So is anybody planning on licensing software product for a new system? Go ahead and answer that question. That poll question should be up in your window. Yes, unsure, or no. Are you planning on licensing a software product for a new system? I will leave that open a few more seconds. All right, so if you haven't voted yet, get your vote in before I close the poll here. And I'm going to stop it now. All right, so it looks like about half of you on this call are planning on licensing a software product for a new system, so that's great. This demo will be directly applicable to you. About 25% of you are unsure, so this demo still probably will be helpful for future reference, and some of you are not, so that's fine. Information later in the webinar will be probably most useful for the 26% that answered no. All right, so let's get into the demo. So after you purchase a product, you're going to get an email that has the purchase, it has the activation ID information that is going to be followed up from your purchase. In this email, I received a license for the manufacturing suite. The manufacturing suite is a very popular option with our customers. It's a bundle of all of what we call our standard drivers. You can go on our website and see what those standard drivers are. It includes a lot of the most popular drivers out there and a huge just laundry list, like I said, of standard protocols that are supported. So that's the manufacturing suite. That is very helpful if you say you're going to be using some Modbus communication and maybe you're also using Siemens, and then later on you're going to add on some other type of hardware. If you have the manufacturing suite, you can use that other type of hardware with an existing standard driver of ours without having to get another activation code, without having to go through and do another purchase. It'll all be set up on your system and ready to go. So very popular option. And the nice thing is that for all of that long list of drivers, it's just one activation ID. So you don't have to go through and input a bunch of separate activation IDs. So the first thing I'm going to do once I get this email is I'm going to copy this activation ID and the emergency activation ID, and I'm just going to put that into Notepad, and then I want to make sure that I save this information somewhere that I can find it later. I want to put it in a place that's accessible, and so, 2 or 5 years down the line, if I have a problem with my system, I know where to find these IDs. Maybe I can use the emergency ID, and I don't get myself into a pickle because I've lost these numbers. So I want to copy this activation ID. That's what I'm going to use in the scenario for licensing this new system, just this regular activation ID. And the next thing I do is get into my license utility. So on the host machine that KEPServerEX is installed, I have this little EX icon in my task tray, and I'm going to right click on that, and I have the license utility that I can click on and get there. So right click on the EX icon, license utility, and I want to select from the drop-down menu Manage Software Licenses. So I select Manage Software Licenses, and then I'm going to click Next. And I'm going to leave it selected as Activate a Product because I'm doing an initial product activation here, and click Next. And then in this activation ID text box here, I'm going to right-click and paste. So that's where I want to enter that activation ID I got in my email. Now I'm ready to click this button that says Save to File, and what that's going to do is generate what's called my activation request file. And I'm going to save that. I'm going to go ahead and save it to my desktop. For those of you who need to save this file to a thumb drive and then take this to another machine with internet, you're going to want to do that at this time. Also, it's a helpful tip to note that you might want to rename this file if you have multiple licenses that you're activating. So for example, maybe I have the manufacturing suite and the advanced tags plugin and data logger plugin that I'm activating. I might want to just rename these activation files so that I don't get them confused. So once I have this activation request file generated, then I need to get to the My Kepware portal. So I'm going to go to kepware.com, and there's this My Kepware link up here. I'm already signed in. If I hadn't been signed in yet, it would have prompted me for my username and password information. If you don't have a sign-in, if you're not registered on our My Kepware area of our website, you're going to have to click Sign Up and fill out your registration information to be able to sign in. So you do need a sign-in for My Kepware to continue this licensing process. Now, the part that I want to go to next is under this product licensing and registration section, and I'm just going to click on the link that says activate a product license. So here's a form. I'm going to need to fill out this information. We have end user registration information. We collect that because it's very helpful for you if you're the end user and you want us to be able, say you lose your activation ID and you call into tech support. If you have your email and your company name and all your info, we can look up activation IDs associated with your account in our system if you enter the correct information here. So it's important to enter correct information here and not just garbage. If I check this box that says I am the end user, the nice time saver, it'll populate this form with all the information that I filled out when I registered for my Kepware account. And that's just a nice time saver. Note that if you're using Internet Explorer, this checkbox, I am the end user, might not work unless you put Internet Explorer into compatibility mode. So I'm using Chrome, the checkbox worked for me. If you're using Internet Explorer, you might need to put your browser into compatibility mode for that checkbox to work. So that checkbox worked, it filled out all my information. Now I have the option to enter what's called installation location notes and some descriptions. This is optional but very helpful for you if you have multiple licenses to manage. So for example, maybe this license I have is installed in Station 2, Line 1. So that just gives me location info for, okay, this is where I have the manufacturing suite for KEPServerEX installed, and maybe I'm using this with some Modbus, Siemens, and Omron devices. So just some helpful info for me to reference again a few years down the line after I do this install, so I can refresh my memory of where it's installed and what I'm using on it. Now I'm going to paste again that same activation ID into this text box, so same one I used in the license utility, and I'm ready to upload my activation request file. I pull that from my desktop, and I'm going to click Generate Activation Response File. My web browser is going to refresh. I don't want to exit my web browser. I'm not going to receive a follow-up email or anything like that. My web browser is going to refresh, and I want to make sure that I let it refresh and wait for it to give me this download activation response file link. All right, so I have to click on this link to get the activation response file and then download it, and that's going to allow me to go back to my license utility. So don't close out your browser till you see this link and click on the link to download it. Now I'm ready to get back into my license utility, so back into KEPServerEX license utility. I'm going to click on this step 3 import file button. I go to my downloads, I see that response file, click open, and license utility is going to process that license and then upload it to my system. And you can see here, full manufacturing suite is now licensed on my system. You see all the drivers, a huge list of them that come with that manufacturing suite. And all of them have the same activation ID because they're all in that same suite. They're all under the same license. I also see my product subscription. So my eligibility date for new versions goes through August of 2016. So I can get new versions for free. I can get 5.18, 5.19, 5.20, all the way up to August of 2016 without needing to get a support renewal to extend this date. So the step-by-step, let's just review. There's a link here. If you click on that link, it will take you to these step-by-steps. And one step, actually, that I just missed, I do want to, very key here, restart my runtime service. So if I right-click here, I want to stop my runtime service. And I want to start my runtime service again to make sure that license takes effect. Very common, easy step to miss like I just did. And that is oftentimes a reason why maybe your license won't be take effect. So step-by-step link there. What I'm going to, again, go to the host machine, manage software license, generate that activation request file, upload that to my Kepware, check I am the end user, and enter things like my installation location notes. Then I'm going to get that activation response file, download it, load it into my license utility again, and then restart my runtime service. So I'm going to just go over briefly some more tools in the license utility and on my Kepware portal for you to use. Before I do that, I want to know, do you have more than one license installed on the same server? So I just went through the scenario where you have, just one license, very straightforward, just the one ID for the manufacturing suite. But you might be in a scenario where you have more than one license on the same server. So is anybody in that scenario? Go ahead and answer the poll question. I'll leave it open for a few more seconds. Okay, so keep going. Do you have more than one license installed on the same server? And I'm going to close this and share with you. So it looks like a lot of you do not. So we'll still go over some tips helpful for even if you only have a single license, but about 36% of you do. So that is also another common scenario where instead of one license, you have multiple. So helpful tools in the license utility, you can view and understand your current license status like I just showed you and what's the eligibility version date. You can compare what you have installed to what you actually have licensed. And I'll show you how to do that in a moment. You can obviously install new software activation IDs and new support activation IDs to extend your eligibility periods. You can transfer an activation ID from one host to another. We'll go over that in more detail, as well as import hardware key certificates, and also go over that later. So here's my licensing information. This is everything I have licensed on my computer. If I get back into my license utility and go manage software licenses, I can see, or actually view license details for this computer. So license utility, view license details for this computer. I can see everything I have licensed here on the computer. If I get into my KEPServerEX configuration, I can go to the help menu, support information, and see, okay, this is the version I'm currently using, and here's it's valid till 2015, so I have a product subscription through 2016, so I know that my product's going to be licensed properly. I can also, if I click versions here, see what I have installed. So I see here, okay, I have the advanced tags plugin installed, but if I look at my license utility, I actually don't have it licensed. So if I wanted to use that advanced tags plugin in production, I'd want to make sure to grab a license for it. So just some helpful tips in the license utility there. Okay, so next poll question is, I want to know if you are managing multiple licenses, how many different licenses do you have to manage, or you might be in that case like we answered in the earlier question where you're just managing one. So do you have more than one license to manage? It might be on a separate machine. So maybe you have several installs of KEPServerEX on separate host machines. So how many of those are you kind of actively managing either on the same machine or different machines? So leave that poll open for a couple more seconds. And please vote. So categories are you have one license to manage, maybe you have a handful, 2 to 5, maybe you have 5 to 10, maybe you have more than 10, that's quite a few, right? Or you just don't know. All right, I'm going to close that poll and share the data with you. So it looks like a lot of you, 50%, which is pretty significant, are in that handful of licenses 2 to 5 range. So I'm going to show you some tools on the My Kepware portal that'll help you manage these multiple licenses. So My Kepware, that's where you can download our products, and that's where you can get licensing instructions, but things that can help you, especially when you're managing multiple licenses, is what we call the Update Eligibility tool and your activation history page. So I'm going to get back to my Kepware, home, and here I see, okay, all the instructions for activation, for transfer, all the current versions as well as previous versions. Maybe you need to roll back to a version. But then I also have this Update Eligibility lookup option. So again, paste my activation ID in there, and I can click this lookup button, and I can see, okay, here's my deployment status. So whether it's deployed, how many activations I have remaining, what the product is, manufacturing suite, and then how long it's eligible for version upgrades. So it's eligible for version upgrades through August of 2016. Helpful tool if you have multiple activation IDs and multiple licenses that you're managing, and maybe they're all, have different support contract expiration dates, and maybe they're all different products. So definitely very helpful for you to use that lookup tool. The other thing that's helpful is under this product licensing and registration section, you can click View Activation History. And that'll take you to a page that lets you see, okay, here's all the licenses that I have, whether they're deployed or banked, what date they were deployed on, and what the product ID is. So very helpful if you're managing that multiple license scenario. All right, so now we'll get into other licensing scenarios, which will be helpful for those of you who might be in a slightly more complicated scenario than the one I went over in the demo. So first thing we'll cover is updates or upgrades. A new version of KEPServerEX is released 3 times a year. So that means 3 times a year we're going to send out a new version with enhancements, new features, new functionality, maybe new drivers. It is highly advantageous to remain under support, because if you are under support, you get those new versions at no extra cost, as long as you have purchased the original software activation. And if you're under support, you have priority access to our technical support team. So if you have a large install base running critical operations, keeping support renewed and active for your products is recommended. It's a fraction of the price of a product license. It's renewed annually, and you can again use that update eligibility tool in the My Kepware portal. If you check that eligibility tool and you are eligible for an upgrade, you simply download the new version, choose a time when production is not running, because you're going to need to stop the runtime service, and go through that round trip process and restart the server runtime. If your install is not, or go through the new install process and restart the server runtime. If your install is not eligible for an upgrade, you're going to want to contact your regional distributor or Kepware to renew or reinstate your support contract. So that brings us to the topic of support renewals, again renewed annually. You must activate a software activation ID, which means you have to go purchase an original software license before you can activate a support activation ID. The support activation ID does not replace an existing software activation. What it does is extend your version eligibility. So in my demo example, my version eligibility went through August of 2016. Once it gets to August of 2016, I'm going to purchase a support activation ID. It's a fraction of the cost of the original purchase that I made, but it'll extend my eligibility so I can get new version updates. And again, contact your distributor. If you're an international customer, we can let you know who your regional distributor is, or Kepware directly to get a support renewal. Okay, so now we're on to the topic of transfers. And this is the case where maybe you have an old host machine, you're upgrading the hardware, you're upgrading the software, and you want to transfer a license that you've purchased previously to that new host machine from the old host. The first thing you want to make sure is that if you're going to be upgrading the software on the new host machine, you want to use that update eligibility tool to make sure that your old license is eligible for the new version. Then the next thing you're going to need to do before you do anything on the new host machine, you're going to want to go to the old host machine, do manage software license, and transfer an activation, and generate what we call the transfer request file and upload that to My Kepware. And what that's going to do is bank it back to our system, and then you're just going to go through the normal licensing procedure on the new host machine. So very important on the old host machine to go through the transfer process, generate the file, as well as upload it to our system before you can reuse that activation ID on a new host. So I'll just show you how this works. Again, right-click on the EX icon, License Utility. I'm going to select from the drop-down menu, Manage Software Licenses, and click Next. This time I'm going to select Transfer a Product Activation, and then click Next. And I only have the Manufacturing Suite license. If I had more things licensed, you'd see more in this drop-down menu. I'm going to select Manufacturing Suite and select Save to File. It's going to prompt me and say, hey, this is going to make your server unlicensed. Are you sure you want to do that? And so I just click OK through there. And I save that transfer request file to my desktop. So that's going to process for a moment, and then now you see, okay, my license is gone. My server is now officially not licensed, and my license information is in this transfer request file. I need to go to My Kepware Home again and go to transfer a license this time. Under product license and registration, click the transfer license link. So click that link, and then I choose the file. So I'm going to click choose file and simply upload that transfer request document. I'm going to process the transfer request, and only after I upload that file and click process transfer request is my license going to be banked back to the system. So I want to wait until I see this message, license number has been successfully banked. Only then can I go license software on another system. And if I go to my Kepware home and view activation history, I can see indeed that license has been banked back to the system. So just a good sanity check for me before I go try and license it on a new host. So this transfers. The next topic we'll get into is emergency licensing. So I talked about this and mentioned this as the third category of activation ID in the beginning of the webinar. So emergency activation IDs, they're going to be provided with that original software activation ID. Very important for you to copy both the original software activation and the emergency activation ID. Very important for you to copy those IDs and put them in a place where you can access them in case something goes wrong. So maybe the hard drive on your host machine dies. Maybe the motherboard gets fried. Something could happen to that system, right? And then you lose that original software activation ID. You didn't have a chance to go through the transfer, so that means you can't use that activation ID, that software activation ID, on any other system. So you're not going to want to get into a scenario where this happens, your system goes down, and you don't know where your emergency activation ID is, right? Because people are going to be calling you on your cell phone and going to be upset, production is going to be down. You're going to want to have this emergency activation ID in an easily accessible place where you remember where you put it. So take note of these emergency activation IDs, very important. And then the software product associated with that emergency ID will run for 7 days. So my emergency activation ID would be good for the manufacturing suite. I can use that on another host, and it'll run for 7 days. During that period, I need to contact my support team, either Kepware support or my regional distributor if I'm an international customer. I'm going to want to contact them and reinstate that original software activation. So again, this is the scenario where you might be kind of panicked because something very bad happened, your production's not running. Important to know these emergency activation procedures so you can get KEPServerEX up and running on another system very quickly, and then call our support team to be able to reinstate their original software activation. Okay, so poll question and kind of a little quiz to see who was listening. The emergency licensing process I just explained, do you feel that this is a proper solution for you if you have a problem with the host machine? So I just explained how the emergency licensing works. Do you feel that's a good solution? Will you be able to use that, and will you know how to use that if you have a problem with your host machine? So go ahead, tell us yes, unsure, or no. Go ahead and answer that poll question. So I'll leave that open for a couple more seconds. So the process I just explained, do you understand it, and will you be able to use it if you have a problem with your host machine? All right, I'm leaving this open for 3 more seconds, 2, 1, and done. So it looks like almost 80% of you said yes, you'll be able to use it. So that's great. 20% of you are unsure. Maybe that's because you're not sure, you've never really done this before. So that's good. That's nice to see that the majority of you will be able to use this process. Wonderful. So last couple subjects here we'll cover. First, remote systems. So people often ask, how do I license something remotely? Well, you do have to log on to that remote machine to activate a license. So VPN, remote desktop, you're going to need to somehow get access to that remote machine to activate the license, and you're just going to go through the activation, process the software activation exactly like I showed you in the demo through the My Kepware portal as normal. So we don't have any special remote licensing procedures. You're going to just have to log on to that remote machine and process the license like I just showed you in the demo. So basically for the remote systems, nothing special. Perhaps you're trying to license something on a remote system, it doesn't have internet access and you don't have a way to get internet access. A good option for that is a hardware license. A hardware license skips the need to go to the Kepware portal and do that round trip with the website. So you'll get a hardware key if this is an option that you want to go with. It's a little dongle. It's about 1 inch, maybe a little bit longer in size. And you're going to get the hardware key and plug that into a USB port of the system you're using KEPServerEX on. And then you're also going to get a file, the hardware key certificate file. All you have to do is have that dongle plugged into your computer and then import the file into the license utility and you'll be good to go. So you won't need, again, to do the round trip with Kepware portal. You'll simply go into the license utility, manage hardware key certificates, import a hardware key certificate, import the file that you'll get when you receive the hardware key, and you're done. So a nice option if you want to remove the internet and remove that round trip with the Kepware portal. All right, so that is it for our other licensing scenarios. Hopefully that was all helpful information for you guys. Now we'll go over, before we end, just common reasons, kind of a review why your license may not be working. So a review of some of the things we covered. So what are some common reasons your license may not be working? You activated the product or tried to, but for whatever reason, you're still in demo mode. First, most simple, KEPServerEX runtime has not been restarted. So remember, go to this little EX icon, right-click on it, stop runtime service, start runtime service. Simple step, lots of people forget it. So do that right off the bat to see if that's the reason why it's not working. The next maybe common reason is that the software version you have installed doesn't meet the eligibility requirements of your license. So for example, my license is good through August of 2016. So maybe I get version, KEPServerEX version 525, and that was released in, 2017. If I try to install that version with my old license that was only good through 2016, I would be in a demo mode. So I am going to need to contact support and get my support renewed. The other common reason is you have a driver or plugin that's in use in your KEPServerEX project that's not licensed. Remember, if you say you have the manufacturing suite license, but then you go to use the data logger plugin, if you have manufacturing suite license, but data logger plugin is not, the entire runtime will trigger into demo mode, including all your manufacturing suite items if you're using the data logger plugin as well, because the data logger plugin is unlicensed. So you need everything that you're using in your active production project to be licensed. And then the other very common reason is there has been a change of that physical machine or host hardware. Remember, the license binds to that physical machine. So maybe the hard drive needs to be replaced or the motherboard is replaced. That will invalidate, in some cases, your license and your activation ID. So contact your regional distributor, contact support to have us help you out with that. Or, use your emergency ID in the meantime to get a machine up and running. Okay, so those are the common reasons for a license not working. Nearing the end of my content here, the last thing I'll give you is some resources. So License Utility Product Manual, you can use that to walk you through the license utility so you understand everything that's there and how it's used. And then the Kepware installation guide, so that's parts of the install that I haven't covered in this webinar. So installing the product, selecting your drivers and your plugins and so on is available. The other resources I listed in the beginning of this webinar, like our YouTube channel and our step-by-step activating a license resource on our webpage, also available as resources for you in this process. You can always contact us, training@kepware.com, if you have questions regarding this webinar content or other training or webinars or anything else you would like. Feel free to contact sales or technical support if you are having issues or you want to license something new. Again, if you're international, you're going to want to contact your regional distributor for this information. If you're not sure who your regional distributor is, you can contact us and we'll get you in touch with them so that you can have local support for your KEPServerEX installs. And at this time, I'm going to go ahead and stop the broadcast, and thank you for all attending. We had over 200 on the webinar today, so it was great to see everybody. And I'll see you hopefully next month for our version 5.18 release webinar. Thanks. Bye.